My son dropped me off at a senior living home. Mom, I'm getting married and my wife will be living in your apartment. Don't be upset. He waited for my tears, for humiliation, for begging. But as I looked into his darting eyes, I suddenly laughed out loud. My sweet, foolish boy had no idea that the apartment he was so generously handing over to his fiancée, well, he had no idea. Sunlight bounced off the windshield as Brian irritably pulled down the sun visor. He stayed silent the whole ride, gripping the steering wheel tighter and occasionally glancing at me in the rearview mirror. I didn't speak either, just stared out the window at the familiar streets passing by. There was the bakery where I used to rush to get fresh bread when Brian was just a little boy. And there his old elementary school where I proudly picked him up after he won yet another award. But inside me, instead of the usual motherly warmth, I felt a cold, heavy knot forming. Something irreversible was happening, but I pushed away the dark thoughts. Mom, we're almost there, he finally said, his voice unnaturally upbeat. You'll love it. Fresh air, pine trees, great care. Emily picked at herself. The best place we found. Emily? Of course. For the past 6 months, it was all I ever heard. Emily thinks this, Emily says that. Emily doesn't like this. This girl had barged into my son's life like a hurricane and turned everything upside down. My calm, slightly timid but kind Brian had become tense and irritable, looking at his fiancée with admiration and at me with thinly veiled annoyance. I tried to talk to him, to explain that I saw right through her. The greedy glint in her eyes as she inspected our modest but cozy apartment, her smug little smirks behind my back. But my son refused to listen. Mom, you're just jealous. You don't want me to be happy, he had yelled. And in those words, I didn't hear my son, I heard her voice. We turned off the highway onto a narrow asphalt road lined with tall pines. Soon, ornate wrought iron gates came into view, and beyond them, a tall brick building. The sign read, Whispering Pines Retirement Home. The name sounded like a cruel joke. This was a prison. A gilded cage. And my only son, whom I loved with all my heart, was delivering me here like I was an old couch someone was getting rid of. He helped me out of the car, fussing around like I couldn't walk, even though I still had strength in my legs. But my legs felt weak, not from age, but from the crushing realization of betrayal. Brian, why are we here? You said we were going out for lunch. My voice came out calm, surprisingly steady. He looked away. Mom, Emily and I are getting married. We need a place to live. Starting our life with you, well, you understand. Young people need their own space. Renting is expensive. Each word he spoke was like a sharp pebble hitting my chest. Our space. The apartment where I was born. Where I lived with his father. Where every corner held a memory. The place my late husband Thomas had poured his heart into renovating by hand. We stepped into a wide lobby that smelled of disinfectant and bleach. A woman in scrubs approached with a forced smile. Mrs. Preston, we've been expecting you. Mr. Brian Preston, all the paperwork is done. You can help your mother settle in. Brian nodded without meeting my eyes and nudged me toward the hallway. And that's when the cold knot in my chest burst and was replaced by burning, icy rage. Not for myself, but for Thomas. For everything I gave up to raise our son, to make sure he had everything. We reached a small, clean but soulless room with institutional furniture. Brian dropped my modest suitcase, which he packed without telling me, on the floor. He fidgeted, then blurted. Mom, I'm getting married tomorrow. And my wife is moving into your apartment. Don't be upset. He looked at me, expecting tears, a breakdown, maybe even begging. I'm sure Emily had coached him on how to handle it. But I did something he could never have predicted. I leaned my head back and laughed, loud, real, unrestrained. The sound echoed down the sterile corridor. Brian froze. His face went pale with shock. Maybe even fear. He probably thought I'd lost my mind. Mom, what's so funny? I wiped away tears from laughing and met his eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't see Emily's shadow in them, just his own confusion. Nothing, son. Nothing at all. My voice had a steel edge. Go ahead and get married. Be happy. But there's one little detail Emily clearly never looked into. And you foolishly forgot. He frowned. What detail? The apartment's yours. You inherited it after Dad died. I saw the paperwork. Yes, you did, I said, smiling. But you must not have read your father's will carefully. Or maybe you forgot the most important clause. His confusion deepened. What clause? I looked at him, unwavering. The apartment does pass to you after my death. But only on one condition, one very specific condition. that you remain a loving and devoted son until the very end of my life. If there's any proof that you neglected me, mistreated me or abandoned me, the apartment legally goes to the state." Brian turned pale. He opened his mouth but no words came. He stared at me trying to figure out if I was bluffing. "You're lying," he finally said, but his voice wavered. "You just don't want us to be happy. You made this up." "Why would I make this up?" I said calmly. "Your father's will was drafted by Victor Simmons, his best friend and a top estate attorney. He still has the original on file. You can call his office, though you won't get far. He'll only discuss it with me, in person or through legal request." Brian began to pace like a caged animal. "That's low, Mom. Hiding something like that for years." "There was no reason to tell you," I shrugged. "You were always a good son until now. I honestly forgot that clause even existed. But your father insisted on including it." "Just in case," he said. "Life changes people. I want to make sure you're protected." At the mention of his father, Brian flinched. He had loved him, I knew that. But right now, Emily's promises of an easy life clouded his mind. At that moment, the door burst open, and in walked the hurricane herself. Emily was dressed in a sleek beige suit, makeup flawless, lips painted bright red in a predatory smile. Her eyes swept over the drab room, then me, then landed on Brian. "Baby, what's taking so long? I already paid for the first month. The champagne is waiting at the restaurant." Her voice was sweet, but laced with venom. Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Preston, don't worry. We'll visit on weekends. Sometimes." Brian turned to her like a drowning man grabbing a life preserver. "Emily, there's a problem. Mom says the apartment isn't really mine yet. That there's a clause in Dad's will." Emily let out a barking laugh. "What?" "Oh please. Don't be ridiculous, Brian. Your mom is just being manipulative. She's making this up to ruin our wedding." Then she looked at me. "That's really low, Mrs. Preston. Faking legal threats? That's beneath you." I smiled coldly. "You might want to hire a good lawyer. Though I'm afraid it'll be a waste of or rather my son's money. The will is real. And it's about to be a very unpleasant surprise for you." Her smile vanished. She looked at Brian, then back at me. "What is she talking about, Brian?" He stammered through the story. As he spoke, her face hardened. By the end, her eyes were filled with icy rage. "So that's how it is," she hissed. "Trying to sabotage us with some dusty document? We'll contest it. We'll say you're senile. That you don't know what you're talking about." She leaned in close. "I have powerful connections, Mrs. Preston. Very powerful." That was the last straw. I stood and stepped right up to her. We were the same height. I looked her straight in the eye. "Try it," I said softly. "Victor Simmons is not just a notary. He's the best inheritance attorney in the city, and your worst nightmare in court. He will destroy your powerful lawyers and file countersuits for defamation and attempted fraud." Her eyes flickered with doubt. She hadn't expected this. She thought I was just an old woman she could push around, not a mother who still knew how to fight. And I remembered the night Thomas made me agree to that clause. We were having tea in our tiny kitchen. "Please," he'd said, holding my hand. "Just in case. People change. If someone ever tries to pressure you, I want you protected." How right he was. Emily, realizing she wouldn't win with aggression, changed tactics. She gave me a syrupy smile and hooked her arm into Brian's. "Come on, sweetie. Let's go. Your mom needs rest. We'll deal with this later." She turned to me again. "And you, Mrs. Preston? Think carefully. You're about to lose your son forever." I watched them walk out and thought to myself, I think I already have. I sneered bitterly. "And not today, but that very day you met her. But you know what, Emily? You're not getting the apartment. You can go ahead and start hauling your things out of it right now." I spoke randomly, but hit my mark. Emily froze halfway to the door and spun around, voice rising to a high-pitched ring. "What things?" "The ones you already started moving," I replied calmly. "Or did you think I didn't notice how my jewelry box disappeared from my bedroom, only to be replaced by your cheap perfume? And that throw rug in the living room I've never seen before? You two were prepping, weren't you? Thinking I'd be too old or foolish to notice. But I see, and I'm no fool." Brian hung his head, ashamed. I saw it. He wasn't evil, just weak, misled by bad influence. Emily shot up in outrage. How dare you? That apartment is ours, almost completely ours. My mom even gave us her old furniture, cause we plan to remodel. You're ruining everything for us. Her tone was that of an entitled homeowner losing what she saw as her rightful property. Her blind confidence was astounding. I'm not ruining anything, I said firmly. I'm defending what was left to me by my late husband, and I won't let either you or my misguided son take it. I looked away toward the window to show the conversation was over. I heard Emily whisper something vicious to Brian. He mumbled back. Then I heard her furious, fast footsteps and his slower, shuffling ones. The door slammed. I was alone. The courage I'd clung to was fading, replaced by a dull, aching pain. I stared out that frozen view of a cold stranger's room and finally let the tears pour down. Tears of hurt and betrayal, not of despair. I wasn't crying because I feared languishing here. I was crying for my son, whom I felt slipping away. But through those tears I knew one thing. I am not giving up. This fight is only beginning. I pulled out my battered cell phone and lined up a number I'd kept under Victor Simmons, attorney, the one who drafted the will. Time to press that button. A few agonizing rings, then his familiar, slightly gravelly baritone. Yes, Lita? Hello, this is Victor. How are you? I steadied my voice. Victor, something happened, exactly what we feared. You remember that clause in the will about a caring son? Of course I do. I drafted it. Well, I said, voice shaking with quiet fury, my son dropped me at a senior home today. He told me I'm moving out so his wife can have the apartment. Silence, thick and furious, filled the line. That little rat, Victor finally hissed. Sorry, just slipped out. So the stop clause kicked in. I told them. They don't believe it. The fiancé even threatened to declare me incompetent, hinting at her connections. Let her try, he growled. I've got a few unpleasant surprises ready, some criminal statutes they'll find interesting. Now listen, he said in his confident, professional tone. Where are you now? Full address. I gave it. He wrote it down fast. Good. Do not talk to anyone. Do not sign anything. Especially no medical consents. Wait there, by yourself. I'm bringing documents and the police. Give me 2 hours at most. His calm authority felt like a shield. I wasn't alone, I had a guardian rock in my corner. Thank you, Victor. Stop it. I gave Thomas my word, I'll always protect you. He hung up. I stared at the mirror above the dresser, tired, old eyes, but a steel hard will burning behind them. My husband always said I had that Siberian backbone. It was time to show it. I freshened up, braced myself, and waited. Those 2 hours passed like glass shards sliding through an hourglass. I held on to memories of my life, meeting Thomas, raising Brian, his first steps, asking myself what I might have done differently. Finally came a tentative knock. Come in. Victor walked in, just as hale and smart as ever, gray in the temples but sharp as a tack. Behind him stood a sturdy local police officer and a young, friendly-looking social services representative. Lita, Victor said warmly, meet Captain Raymond Hayes and Ms. Allison Carter, Senior Services. I exhaled. The question I'd nearly shouted, guardianship. Victor answered before I spoke. Ms. Carter is here at my request. That brash fiancé threatened to have you declared incompetent. This will halt any attempts and she'll certify you are being held here against your will. Ms. Carter offered a reassuring smile. Don't worry, Mrs. Preston, just a conversation and a written finding. That's all that's needed. At that moment, the door burst open. Brian and Emily stormed in, their anger barely contained. They froze, taking in the unexpected scene. Emily's facade fell. Brian turned pale. What is going on here? Brian stammered. Victor stepped forward, shielding me. Restoring justice, young man. I am Victor Simmons, attorney for Mrs. Preston. This is Captain Hayes and Miss Carter. We're here to take her home. Home? Emily screeched. What home? She's staying here. We paid. She agreed. The officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, that kind of language, one more insult like that and we'll be filing charges. Understand? Stunned, Emily fell silent. She glared at me. Victor turned to Brian. A question for you, Brian Preston. Were you aware of the clause in your father's will? Brian looked down. I saw fear in his body, fear not for me but for himself, for the life he thought was guaranteed. No. Victor pressed. You don't remember? He smirked. How convenient. I, however, remember very well being summoned by your father and sworn in front of a notary when you turned 18. You signed the will. We have the papers. Want to see them? Brian looked at me with tears, more hurt than regret. Mom, why would you do this? I stepped forward, voice echoing strong. Because you took your mother to a home so your predator fiancé could have our home. Because you lied about moving my things. Because you stood by as she threatened me. And now you ask me why I did this. He shook, tears dropping. You should thank your father, he was wiser and more farsighted than either of us. He saved me from you, Brian, from his own son. Emily leaped at him. Come on, you wimp, are you going to stand there and cry? Or be a man? It's either me or your crazy mother and her fake documents. If you don't throw them all out right now and get her to sign over the apartment, forget about me. And forget the wedding. Emily delivered her ultimatum and fell silent, waiting for Brian's decision. The room froze. Everyone turned to my son. This was it, the moment of truth. The one choice that would define the rest of his life. Brian slowly lowered his hands from his face. But he didn't look at me. He looked at her. And in that look, I saw what shattered me completely. There was no love or fire in his eyes. Only a sticky, degrading fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of losing the illusion of power she had built around him. A fantasy world where he was a confident man, not some overgrown boy still tethered to his mom. He was willing to destroy me to hold on to that fantasy. Mom, he whispered without meeting my eyes, just sign it. Emily's right. It's better for everyone this way. We'll visit you. I promise. A heavy silence filled the room. Even Victor was speechless. Emily smiled triumphant. She had won. She thought she'd secured her obedient husband and the apartment too. But something inside me shifted in that moment. Or maybe something was forged. The pain left. In its place came a cold, clear calm. I looked at the man who used to be my son and realized I didn't love him anymore. That maternal love I had nurtured for so many years, it was gone. That was terrifying. But it was also liberating. All right, I said, voice steady. Everyone flinched. Brian looked at me startled. Full of renewed hope. I'll sign, I said. But first, you two need to see something. I turned to Victor. Vic, do you have your laptop with you? He blinked, still stunned. Yes, in the car. Get it. We'll need internet. I'm sure the lovely staff will give us the password. I looked at the administrator, who had been silently pressed to the wall. She nodded quickly, pale. 10 minutes later, Victor had the laptop open on the table. Emily and Brian exchanged confused glances. They thought this was my final act of surrender. It's ready, Victor said, turning the screen toward me. No, face it toward them, I corrected. They're the ones who need to watch. This movie's about them. I opened my email and clicked a link. The screen lit up with video from a hidden security camera. An old one my late husband, Thomas, had installed in the hallway years ago. He was a bit paranoid. Always worried about burglars. The camera was outdated, no sound, but the image was clear. Triggered on motion. I had forgotten it even existed. Until Emily started showing up a little too often. Something made me check. And what I found? The hallway appeared. Emily entered. I wasn't home. She glanced around. Her face twisted into a sneer. She walked into the living room, ran a finger over the polished sideboard, my wedding dowry, and wiped it on her jeans with disgust. She walked to a shelf, picked up our wedding photo, stared at it and turned it to face the wall. Brian flinched like he'd been slapped. Emily gripped his arm. It's fake, she hissed. She made it up. Keep watching, I said coldly. There she was, trying on my favorite brooch, the one Thomas gave me for our silver anniversary. She twirled in front of the mirror, mocked my style, then tossed it on the dresser. She opened the fridge, pulled out the cherry preserves I made for Brian, sniffed it with disdain and poured it down the sink. But the worst was still to come. Brian walked in. He hugged her. She said something, there was no sound, but it didn't matter. She gestured at the furniture, the rugs, the paintings, then laughed. Brian frowned at first, but then he smiled. He nodded in agreement. Then she picked up a stack of my old gardening magazines, ones I'd kept for decades, and threw them in the trash, staring him in the eyes. And he said nothing, just watched. A silent accomplice. When the video ended, Brian sat hunched, shoulders trembling. He couldn't lift his eyes. Emily's face was ghost white. She was caught. Ugly. Petty. Pathetic. Well, Brian, I asked softly, still want me to sign it over? Want her to own the home your father and I built? The woman who mocked everything that mattered to us. He He said nothing. Let me ask it another way, I continued. Are you a man? Your fiancé just asked you that. Show us. Show yourself. He looked up at Emily. Really looked at her. Not the fantasy. Not the illusion. But the cruel, smug predator she really was. I saw it in his eyes. Something shifted. The fear was gone. It was replaced by disgust. Get out, he said quietly. Emily blinked. What? I said get out. Out of my life. Pack your things and leave my mother's apartment. You little mama's boy, she shrieked. You'll regret this. You're nothing without me. You'll come crawling back. No, he said, voice flat. I'd rather be nothing than with you. Emily realized it was over. She turned to me, eyes full of hate, then stormed out. Her heels clacked like gunfire. The door slammed behind her like a final shot. Brian turned to me, his face streaked with tears. Real tears. Mom, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I was blind. I was such a fool. He dropped to his knees, wrapped his arms around my legs and sobbed like a child again. My heart, so hard for so long, finally cracked. I laid a hand on his head. I didn't forgive him all at once. You can't just erase that kind of betrayal. But I knew then my son hadn't died. He had simply gotten lost, blinded by someone else's will. Now he was back. We left the care home that same day. Victor handled the legalities. The officer made sure no one interfered. The ride home was silent. Brian sat beside me, eyes downcast. Back at the house, he quietly began packing up Emily's things. Her clothes, her makeup, her cheap jewelry. Methodically. Angry at himself. I brewed tea. Cherry jam on the side. The same one she'd thrown away. But I'd found another jar in the back of the fridge. When he sat down, I placed a cup in front of him. I'll pay you back, he said. Every dollar she made me take. I'll get a second job if I have to. I know, I whispered. He was quiet for a long time. Mom, the will. It's still valid, I told him. Your dad was a wise man. He didn't just leave you an apartment. He left you a chance to prove you're worthy of it. The rest is up to you. A year has passed since. It wasn't easy. Brian did get a second job. He came home late, exhausted. But every night we sat in that little kitchen drinking tea. We didn't talk much about the past. We just rebuilt. Little by little, he earned back my trust. Not with words but with actions. He fixed the door. Replanted the garden. Took me to the doctor. He became my son again. And I his mom. One night, watching him doze off from sheer exhaustion, I realized I had forgiven him. Because real maternal love doesn't die. It just waits.